Recently I made a video talking about what I really liked about RelativityOne. And as a response to that, number of people said, what about Relativity Server? You know, there's so many people using Relativity Server, why don't you mention some of the things about that? And the reason why I talked about RelativityOne is because I had access to it, and that was my first time, my first opportunity to properly evaluate it and use it. So that's why that video was RelativityOne specific, but since people asked, why don't we talk about what I really like about relativity in general that covers Relativity Server specifically, that whether you are a RelativityOne user or Relativity, that you can benefit from. So where I want to start with is Relativity's Viewer, the native viewer that's built in right into Relativity. A lot of people don't realize how good it actually is until it's gone. Now, when I tried some other software that didn't have that viewer, my experience was always much worse. There was some kind of HTML rendering of the documents or some kind of approximation of a native file, but it was never as good as the viewer that's built into Relativity. Now, what I heard is that Relativity has purchased a source code for Quick View Plus, or maybe it was called Inside Out or something like that at that time, I can't remember. But they've purchased that source code and they continue developing and building it, and then they've built it into Relativity. Relativity Viewer is one of the really awesome features in Relativity that on-prem users and cloud users can take advantage of. The only tiny disadvantage it has is rendering some of the text-based PDFs. Sometimes they do come out as a garbled text, and I had a support ticket open about this for like 5 years or so, but you know, maybe it's just impossible to render them. Who knows? Now, speaking of PDFs, one of the things Relativity does really well is process them. Problem with PDFs is they contain text and image-based elements, and a lot of software gets confused as to how to handle that. Because if you look at PDF and it has text, well, you got to extract the text, right? But sometimes the text only covers the base numbers on the bottom, or there could be some other combination. And Relativity is really good at figuring out those complicated PDF files. It separates the layers, the text-based layers from image-based layers, extracts all the text, OCRs the image-based layers, and I think you get really great OCR from Relativity processing when it comes to PDF files. Next, Relativity is a platform. You probably heard that, but a lot of people don't really understand what that means. So a lot of e-discovery software is just written as, you know, an application that does something. Relativity is a little different. Relativity is written as more like an operating system, Relativity itself, and multiple applications on top of it. So if you think of like how your phone works, you have an iOS operating system and you have apps that you run. Well, Relativity is kind of like that. It's just not very obvious to a user because how well all those applications are integrated together. You have your review application, you have your processing application, you have your production application. They're all separate applications. And what's cool is you can create your own applications that run on that platform. So for example, application I have two applications that I created to expand other software. One of them is for law pre-discovery. And the way law works is it's normal e-discovery application that talks to SQL Server. And what I did is I built an application that's running on the side, and it's also talking to that SQL Server. So we basically have two applications, and the user has to go either to law to do something or to my application. Now, I did same thing in Relativity, where I have an application to expand Relativity's functionality called Batch Guru. And that application is fully integrated in Relativity. So when the user is in the workspace, they don't even know they're using application developed by somebody else. It looks just like something Relativity would have built, or it looks like something that's built into Relativity. But in fact, it's my own application that's been loaded separately into the environment. Does it really matter if it's a platform or just an application? Well, it depends. If you're happy with functionality that you have, no, you're fine. You can just use the software. But if you want to expand it or build on top of it, having something that is expandable, of course, is going to be important. Now, the other thing about having a platform is the future, where the company is going. And right now, Relativity just serves legal industry, But in the future, it could be expanded to be a database in general. You could use this for tech support, you could use it for any kind of database storage. You don't have to have your review and processing applications installed. You could have applications that serve, financials, companies, or something else. And right now it doesn't exist, but I believe that's where Relativity is going with this. Think of like a Salesforce. You can build anything you want on top of it. And finally, it's the community. With so many users all over the world, you can get information you need. If you need to learn something, if you need to ask a question, there is a community forum you can post into. You probably know multiple people in lit support who also use Relativity. You can ask them questions. There are people who are willing to share their expertise. They're willing to share scripts, possibly even applications that you can install your Relativity. So having such a huge number of users everywhere in the world is a big deal, just from a perspective of getting information and finding help when you need it. So that would conclude my list of what I think is really nice about Relativity Server or Relativity in general. If you have anything to add, please put it in the comment section below. Don't forget to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video.